What's going on, Dolphin fans? It is your boy Dillon, and I am here with you to do the post-game analysis of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Miami Dolphins. It was in Tampa Bay, and we'll get to it. Before I actually, I'm going to give you the breakdown, of the stats and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. But before that, I want to tell you guys the players. There were a lot of significant players that did not play in this game, including Devontae Parker, Albert Wilson, Jakeem Grant, Rashad Jones, TJ McDonald, Kenyon Drake, Walt Aikens, Andrew Van Ginkel, Kiko Alonso, Quentin Poling, Raekwon McMillan, Chase Allen, Zach Stirrup, and Xavier Howard. So, and obviously the vast majority of those are guys on the defense, which is troubling, but we will get into that more as we go through. But I mean, it's preseason game 2, and we've got a ton of guys, big names, important key players that have, various different injuries. So that right there is pretty concerning, to say the least. So yeah, there's that. But okay, so, we went into the game with that, and just real quick as a little bit of a synopsis, I mean, I think overall the game was pretty terrible. I think, though, that the offense played terrible overall, but the defense played well overall, but with breakdowns, particularly later on in the game because of the fact that they were getting tired and stuff, which is understandable. And special teams was just kind of whatever. But, you had defense playing, well overall, and offense just completely shitting the bed. So, you get what you get. And, so we go into the game with that. And let me go ahead and get to the results, right? So, Dolphins at Bucks. And, we end up coming out of the game with a loss, which is obviously disappointing, even though it's only preseason. It's, partly disappointing for me because I don't really expect us to win too many games. So I was hoping we might be able to pull out the victory and, at least get a win somewhere, somehow, right? But that didn't happen. We lose 16-14. We had 280 total yards. They had 309. Not that much better than us, but I mean, 280 is not really, you want to be at least over 300 of total yards, preferably even, 400 or 500 of total yards. I mean, at the end of the day, the total yardage wasn't terrible, right? But that's not really where the big problems came in. We definitely didn't have a lot of big plays, so that hurt us for sure. But anyway, we'll get into that a little bit more. So we had 162 passing yards. They had 234. So overall, I mean, 162 passing yards. I mean, look, our offense just didn't do very much, really, at all. Frankly, they had 234 passing yards. We had 162. We had 118 rushing yards. They had 75. We had 4.2 yards per play. They were at 4.5. They lost a fumble and we lost an interception. Here's a big one, though. 12% on third downs. Obviously, that's huge. They were 26%. We had the ball for 27 minutes, 57 seconds. They had it for 32 minutes, 3 seconds. And obviously, 13 penalties on us doesn't help either. So that was a pretty big concern. We had 8 last week, which wasn't the worst thing. But, a lot of those were on the offensive line. We saw several of those tonight. But an uptick, up to 13. They had 8 penalties. Getting into the passing statistics. So Josh Rosen was 10 of 18 for 55.6% completion percentage on 102 yards. So look, I mean, at the end of the day, in this game, right? Last game, the team played well overall. The defense was solid. The offense surprised me. Ryan Fitzpatrick played all right. The offensive line played all right overall, which was the big surprise really for me in that game. But then it allowed the quarterbacks to actually do some decent things. But, even last game, Josh Rosen did struggle a lot. And he made a lot of bad decisions, including the near pick six, the interception he threw straight to the defender, right? So, and, you know, Brian Flores talked afterwards about his body language, blah, 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 which didn't seem to improve really any into this game, even though he played the entire first quarter, or first half, sorry, and did start the game. But, you know, I mean, those numbers are right on par with his numbers last year, behind a terrible offensive line. And so that's why I've been saying he's not being helped out at all by coming to Miami. You know, some people are like, oh, the offensive line is going to be better for him. No, it's not. It's going to be at least the same, if not worse. And we saw that in a big way tonight. The offensive line just broke down from start to finish time and time again. And, you know, you'll get a better illustration of that as we go. Jake Rudock was 6 for 11, 54.5 completion percentage, 72 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Ryan Fitzpatrick, 3 of 9 for 33.3% completion percentage and 20 yards. So see, I mean, just off of those numbers, obviously the passing game was, you know, I wouldn't even say really average. It was just kind of like struggling along the best it could. Although that was better. Our passing overall was definitely better than our rushing overall. Our rushing offense was just atrocious for the vast majority of the game. They couldn't create holes for shit. We were getting, you know, tackles for losses, pretty big ones even on a couple occasions. You know, they were getting tons of pressure on the quarterback the whole time. You know, they got several sacks. So, I mean, it just wasn't, you know, it just wasn't good stuff. So, you know, I mean, there's definitely major concerns there. For them, Ryan Griffin led the way, 14 of 21 for 66.7 completion percentage, 201 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Blaine Gabbert was 5 of 12, 41.7 completion percentage, 42 yards. Jameis Winston, 2 of 4, 50%, 24 yards. He only played 1 series, to be fair to him. But overall, I mean, you know, their offense obviously did better in the passing game, and overall too in the running game. I mean, they just, you know, they outperformed us on offense. And so overall the game was rather defensive, right? Our defense played solid overall. They let up like 1 or 2 things early in the game, but then they started letting up more, obviously, as backups starting coming in, but also because guys were getting, you know, tired and winded. Not to mention all the defensive players that we had out of the game right from the start. So, but it was a defensive game, obviously low score. For the vast majority of it, it was like 3-3, 6-3, blah, 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 whatever. But at the end of the day, the team that usually ends up winning in those situations when it's a defensive game like that is the team that does a little bit better on offense. And they definitely did a bit better than us on offense. Their offensive line certainly wasn't nearly as trash as ours was tonight. But getting into rushing, for us, Patrick Laird actually led the way, which he did last week as well. Overall, he's kind of bottom of the barrel, so to speak, on the depth chart there, but he might be giving himself a case to move up. He was 7 for 51 yards at a 7.3 average tonight. Kenneth Farrow came after that with 3 rushes for 41 yards and a 13.7 average. And then Myles Gaskin was 6 for 17 with a 2.8. Mark Walton 5 for 8 with 1.6. So, you know, like I said, I mean, our rushing offense, some of those numbers there at the top, you know, Patrick Laird and Kenneth Farrow are a little bit, misguiding, just simply because that, you know, those were the guys at the end of the game against like 3rd, 4th, 5th string players on their defense. And it was in, you know, garbage time where they're running like quick, you know, faster offense, 2-minute offense, 4-minute offense and stuff like that. So, you know, it's not, you know, I mean, it's good, but it's not, you know, it doesn't say that much as far as like, you know, positives for our running game. I mean, the vast majority of it, our running game was just getting demolished. For them, Dare Ogunbowale had 13 rushes for 34 yards, a touchdown, 2.6 average. Andre Ellington was 6 for 15 yards and a 2.5 average. So yeah, I mean, our run defense was solid. I mean, we held them to 75 overall. And like I said, overall, the defense was solid. And I do think, as I've been saying, that our defense will probably be the strong suit of this team. The problem is that one, if the defense is going to be banged up like it seems to be already, if that continues, then that'll just exacerbate the problem. But the problem stems from the fact that our offense will most likely be pretty putrid, because the offensive problems will stem from the terrible offensive line play, which will then expose the quarterbacks that we have that do not play well by any means up to this point from what they have shown in their careers behind terrible offensive lines. And so the offensive line play will break down, which we've already started seeing significant cases and examples of. The quarterback play will then break down, which we have seen examples of already. And then it will completely mitigate the fact that we have wonderful skill players at the running back position, at the wide receiver position, even at the tight end position, right? It'll mitigate that because we won't be able to do it. We won't be able to get the ball to people. We won't be able to open up lanes for running. I mean, they can still prove me wrong, but we're 2 weeks away from the start of the season, and it doesn't look like the trend is going to get bucked all of a sudden just because we hit the regular season. So, it is definitely highly concerning, and, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. And then also, too, the big concern to finish that thought is, it's also going to, put a major strain on the defense, like what we, saw like last year and the year before that. Like last year, once our offense started getting terrible because the offensive line got injured, then our receivers got injured, so on and so forth. Our defense was playing great at the beginning of the year, just like the offense was for the first few games. But then they started, the offense started sputtering, getting 3 and outs more and more, so on and so forth. And then the defense got winded and, beat to shit. And our bye this year is early. So we're going they're going to get an early rest when they're, already relatively fresh because it's early on in the season. But and then they're just going to get hammered down the stretch. And, we have a tough schedule too on top of that. So it's going to be a really rough, long year for us. And so you guys, everybody just needs to brace for that. It's not going to be, flowers and sunshine. But unfortunately, and just real quick, this is a little, further off into the future, and there's been a lot of talk about this, but unfortunately, it looks like they're going to end up once again neglecting the offensive line next year in the draft. Now that's still a ways away, but like I said, there has been talk and reports about it. They're going to neglect it, the offensive line, and try and get a top signal caller, which I think is completely stupid. I don't, as you guys should already know, I don't advocate for taking one higher than the 3rd round ever, but you should always take a quarterback every single year depending on how badly you actually need one. 3rd round if you really need one super bad. And just one real quick to reiterate, I would have taken a top offensive lineman in the draft in round 1. Kept Ryan Tannehill, not traded for Josh Rosen, got a D lineman in round 2 and Will Grier in round 3. Anyway, so there's that, but also then what is that? I mean, we know Ryan Fitzpatrick's not going to be the future of this franchise, but then what does that say about the hopeful future of the franchise and Josh Rosen? If you take Tua Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert high in the draft, you're essentially saying, well, the 2 guys that we brought in this past year, we've given up on already. So, that doesn't really look good. And then, but then it's a huge and even bigger mistake because, again, they would be neglecting the offensive line and they would be getting their top signal caller hammered behind a very porous Swiss cheese looking offensive line. So they're setting themselves up for failure. And then, again, one of my biggest concerns that I've said in general on the macro scale is that we're going to end up having pretty bad years for the next couple years, 2 or 3 years, and then everybody's going to get super impatient and be like, oh, he needs to be fired and they need to tear everything down to the studs again, when I'm going to be the only one still in year 3 advocating for them to have for Brian Flores to have the full 5-year contract that he is currently guaranteed. But, the fan base is going to be all up in their feelings and emotions and, pissed off that we're losing again. And then they're going to want everybody fired. But nobody ever wants Stephen Ross to step down. I'm done with him personally. I want him to step down. Anyway, moving on though. For the receiving, oh no, that's not right. Oh no, yeah, that is right. My bad. Okay, so for us, Saeed Blacknall led the way, 1 of 3 receptions for 25 yards. And that was the leader. So, you know, I mean, the ball went to a lot of different people, but, you know, we didn't put up very good numbers. None of them put up very good numbers individually. The quarterbacks didn't. It was pretty bad. Durham Smythe was 1 of 2 for 22 yards. Isaiah Ford, 2 of 4 for 20 yards. Bryce Butler, 2 of 3 for 18. Kenny Stills, 2 of 3 for 16. Patrick Laird, 2 of 2, 16 yards and a score. Chris Myarick, 1 of 1, 16 yards. Mike Gesicki, 2 of 3, 14 yards. Reese Horn, 1 of 1, 12 yards. Mark Walton, 1 of 1, 12. Clive Walford, 1 of 3 for 10, and Preston Williams, 1 of 6 for 7. So real quick, I do want to talk about him. I think he got a lot of potential, and I think could be, you know, a great receiver for us, hopefully, and certainly has the potential to be a number 1. But look, you know, if for anybody who had expectations that he was going to go and just light it up this game, I feel, you know, you were setting yourself up for some failure and disappointment, rather, you know, by doing that. One, he's still a young guy. He's a rookie. He was an undrafted free agent. Yes, he's been making a lot of noise and doing good things, but he just had a spectacular game. It's reasonable to expect that he would come down to earth a little bit, and he had an exceptionally quiet game. Plus, you know, not that it's an excuse, but, you know, with all that hype and pressure, plus it was a wet game out there, he did drop a couple passes, he did have some mistakes, you know, whatever. But there was also, he did also, even though, you know, he had modest numbers and made some mistakes, he still showed some of the flashes, and he still continued to bail Josh Rosen out a bit. You know, there was one pass where the pass was, you know, off target a bit, kind of underthrown, but he's a smart dude. He's a big guy. He knows how to use his body. He tipped the pass up in the air to give himself an additional chance. He comes around, he makes the catch, he secures the ball, he gets his right foot on the inside of the pylon to get a score. The problem was he just barely stepped out of bounds with his left foot. So, like, my point is I don't want people to, like, I just feel like one way or the other, good or bad, people just get all up into their feelings and just go like balls to the wall with it and start getting super extreme. Like, you know, like, for what I mean by that is like, you know, everybody last game being super high on him, and then like if all of a sudden you flip and be like, you know, blah blah blah, you know what, you know, and start being all sour about it, right? Like, stuff like that, we gotta calm down. And then on top of that, then you add in the fact that, you know, the expectation for this offensive line is pretty low, and then with the quarterbacks behind him, like, the pieces were there to where, you know, it was certainly reasonable and logical that, you know, he was going to have a slower game, you know, and a bit of a drop back down to earth. But I do think he has a lot of potential, and hopefully he can be a wonderful asset for us in the long haul. For them, Tanner Hudson led the way. You know, a lot of this, though, was garbage time and at the very end, but they did end up winning, so, you know, whatever. But he was 6 of 7 for 93 yards and a score. Dare Ogunbowale was 3 of 3 for 54 yards. Bobo Wilson, 2 of 7, 48. Justin Watson, 2 of 6, 22. And O.J. Howard, 1 of 2 for 16, with Andre Ellington 4 of 4 for 14 yards. So obviously, you know, they definitely had better production in the passing game than we did overall, really. Fumbles, Trent Irwin had a fumble, but he didn't lose it. It managed to jump right into Chris Lamons' hands. I think it was on like a punt or something. He got the recovery, but then when he got tackled, he fumbled it, and it just floated right into Chris Lamons' hands. And then he ended up getting like an extra 15 yards, which was cool, but, you know, super lucky. Andre Ellington had a fumble and lost it. It was a fumble forced by Sam McGuavian, who he was a bright spot. Out of the bright spots from this game, I would say the overall play of the defense, Sam McGuavian's play for sure, he hella stood out. Minka Fitzpatrick played well. Patrick Laird was, you know, a bright spot on the offense, but, you know, obviously, like I said, for full context, I was at the end of the game in garbage time, you know, with, you know, 2-minute, 4-minute offenses against like 3rd, 4th, and 5th string guys, blah, blah, blah. But still, you know, bright spot nonetheless. And so, Sam Aguavian led the way. He was all over the place for us tonight. He led the way on the defense. 5 solo tackles, 2 assisted with 2 tackles for loss and a forced fumble, the aforementioned one. Adolphus Washington came up behind him with 4 solo, 1 assisted. Nick DeLuca had 4 solo, 1 assisted, and 1 tackle for loss. Jamal Wiltz, 3 solo, 1 assisted. Charles Harris showed up tonight with 3 solo tackles, 1 assisted, 1.5 sacks. Which is really good. We need him to come on. He had a tackle for loss as well. We need him to start living up to his draft status for sure, because, with the way that we just, purged, the whole team, but on the defensive end in particular, I advocated get rid of Andre Branch. He wasn't productive enough, especially for his price tag. Robert Quinn, I was kind of, indifferent. I would have kept him. But I was, I didn't care either way, and he did have a, substantial price tag, so I didn't really care about that too much. I did care about Cameron Wake. I would have kept him absolutely 100%. I would have found a way. No excuses. I would have found a way. William Hayes, I would have at least kept him for camp, but we lost him as well. So then, when you have such a massive hole, you need guys to step up, and so hopefully Charles Harris can do that. Hopefully he can build on this game. Tank Carradine has been doing some good things, so hopefully he can continue. He did make a little noise tonight, although not a super lot, but he did get some pressures, and I think maybe he got a sack or something, or close to it. But then Nate Orchard has been doing some good things. He was next with 2 solo tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss. Chris Lamons had 2 solo tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and a pass defense. Including also, like I said, that fumble recovery on the special teams play. Christian Wilkins had 2 solo tackles. He came in with a sack and a tackle for loss, though, so that is good things coming from our first round pick this year. And like I said, I would have done the draft totally different, but that is not an indictment on Christian Wilkins. And I like him, and I think he's a good player, and I think he could be a good player for us. Just with the current state of the team, with the holes on the roster that we had, and so on and so forth, particularly after the massive purge, I would have just done things so much different. And, but again, I would have kept Ryan Tannehill, not picked up Fitzpatrick. I would not have traded for Josh Rosen, got an O lineman in round 1, especially considering the run on defensive linemen that happened in round 1 before we picked. I would have taken the top offensive lineman, Garrett Bradbury. I would have done everything I could to keep Jawan James. That would have set you up with James or Tunsil, Bradbury in the center. If Kilgore couldn't, hack it, or if he got hurt, Jawan James on the right side, who's a solid bookend. You would have had your 2 bookends. Jesse Davis would have been, just fine in at right guard, and then I would have kept Josh Sitton in camp at least, although to be fair, I think he did end up retiring, but I would have at least tried to keep him in camp to round out that offensive line. But I'm sure, they could have found somebody that would work, right? But just now that would have at least given you a solid skeleton for the offensive line, your 2 bookends and your center. But now we have Laramie Tunsil, and that's really about it. So, but anyway, like I said, not an indictment on Christian Wilkins. Eric Rowe had a solo tackle, a fumble recovery. He recovered the fumble that Sam Aguavian forced. Minka Fitzpatrick had 1 solo, 1 assisted, and a pass defense. Jerome Baker had 1 solo, 2 assisted, a half sack. Terrell Hanks had 1 solo tackle, 1 tackle for loss, and Nick Needham had a solo tackle, an assisted tackle, and a pass defense. For them, Lucas Dennis led the way, 4 solo, 1 assisted. Pat O'Connor, 3 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Jack Sishi, I'm totally going to fuck up his name and a lot of others, but he had 3 solo, 2 assisted, and 1 pass defense. Kevin Minter, 2 solo, 1 assisted, 1 pass defense. Bo Allen, 2 solo, 2 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Farrington Huguenin, 2 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Damone Harris, 2 solo, 1 assisted, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. Devontae Bond, 2 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defense. So as you can see, there were a lot of sacks, a lot of tackles for loss, several passes defensed. Our offense was just putrid tonight. Devontae Bond, 2 solo, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, a pass defense. Jamel Dean, 2 solo, an interception, 2 passes defensed. William Golston, 1 solo tackle, a tackle for loss. Shaquille Barrett, 1 solo, 1 assisted tackle, a sack, a tackle for loss, and a pass defense. John Battle, 1 solo, 1 assisted, and a pass defense. And Terry Beckner added in a pass defense. In the kicking game, Jason Sanders was good for his 2 field goals with a long of 49. Didn't kick any extra points because even after our touchdown, we went for the 2-point conversion, which did give us the lead 14-3. But then they had like 30-something seconds, and our defense broke down because 1, it was backups. 2, they were tired. They got down. That was when Tanner, the receiver, Tanner Hudson, started, lighting it up against our tired backups. And, they got down close enough to get a game-winning field goal, which was basically a chip shot. So, yeah, there's that. Matt Gay was 2 of 2 on his field goals for them with a long of 48, 1 of 1 on his extra points. And Cairo Santos was 1 of 1 on field goals for a long of 23. Punting, Matt Hawk had 7 punts, 43.7, 2 inside the 20 with a long of 55. But, Bradley Pinion also did have 7 with a 44.4 average, 1 inside the 20 with a long of 52. Like I said, overall, it was a very defensive-heavy game, but their offense certainly outplayed ours. Kickoff return, Mark Walton had 1 for a 26 average, long of 26. Myles Gaskin had 1, 14 average, long of 14. Bobo Wilson for them had 1, 18 average, long of 18. Ronald Jones had 1 with a 15 average, obvious long of 15. Punt returns, Trenton Irwin had 3 punts for us with a 3 average and a long of 5. Preston Williams had 3 with a 4 average and a long of 11. And they didn't actually take any punt returns back. So, yeah, that's the full, statistical breakdown and a lot of my analysis, like I said. So just to wrap up again, we have our next game next week, though, against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That is going to be in Miami, but that is a tough team. And then we have the Saints for our final preseason game. Honestly, our last 2 preseason games and damn near pretty much every game in the season is going to be tough games. Look, like I said, I don't expect us to win a lot this year, and that's just how it is, because that's how I see things. That's my perspective based off of the information and the data that I have. So that's how I'm preparing myself. But I am optimistic. There are good things. So, like I said, our offense played putrid tonight, but on the offense, Patrick Laird was a bright spot. That's really it. The bright spot from last week offensively did fall off and have a quiet game, Preston Williams, but I think he will bounce back and be good. The overall bright spot player-wise was Sam Aguavian, who, like I said, did a lot of really good things for us, and he certainly showed up. He did what Preston Williams did last week. He took his opportunities and he certainly made the most of them. So he is a bright spot. The defense as a whole is a bright spot, but again, unfortunately, could and will be negated if the offense continues to be terrible, and especially, then if we start getting, more injuries and so on and so forth. So, that is my analysis of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Miami Dolphins preseason 2 game. For anybody who joined me, in the live stream, I appreciate that. I enjoy the conversations. It's fun. I enjoy the live streams. I had to restart it like 10 minutes into it because I was having a little connection problem and it wasn't connecting to the chat and stuff. So I apologize for that, but I did get it going. I am going to do that, you know, for the rest of the preseason, throughout the season, all the games. I will be doing live streams during the games, so that way, you know, we can talk through this stuff together, so we can point this stuff out, you know, live, you know, as it's happening. Anyway, and so, you know, at the end of the day, even though I don't have high expectations, you know, I'll say it again, I am, you know, a diehard fan. I love Dolphins football, and I'm always going to, you know, be here and excited to watch them play, even if it is dreadful most of the time. So, but, you know, we'll work through it together, and hopefully, you know, at some point, you know, we will be able to get, you know, a turnaround. And again, one last time, I do hope that they can prove me wrong, but unfortunately the trend does not seem to be pointing in that direction, and I don't believe that it will end up being a happy ending this season at the very least. So we'll see what happens. Again, hopefully they prove me wrong, but you know, we still got a few more months to go before we can, you know, fully evaluate that and see how they ended up doing this season. So anyway, with that, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. I hope you guys do enjoy, you know, my show and the things that I do, and I'm, you know, I'm definitely, like I said, I'm working on, you know, improving it, trying to spend as much time as I can, you know, learning my new software and trying to improve my, you know, video quality and my production, as well as trying to do more things for you. I like doing the live streams. It's a lot of fun. So I'm going to continue all that. And so I hope you enjoy my show. If you do, and my perspective, of course, because I know it's very often different than most of the other people and other podcasters and so on and so forth. So I hope you enjoy it. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.